I want to go ahead and get going. First of all, thanks so much for being here. We really do appreciate it. We have new friends, old friends here today, and that's wonderful. New faces. We first met Charlie, our wonderful speaker, through Ann Barrett Doyle from Bishop Accountability. Our group brought Ann in 2 years ago, and when Ann got back to Boston, I think she realized she hadn't seen Charlie at the event. And so she got in touch with us and said, you have to meet Charlie Feliciano. He would appreciate your group, and you would love him. So we met Charlie. He's been with us ever since, and we do greatly appreciate him. Although appreciation is an understatement. I've said that if we had a popularity contest in Code Purple, Charlie would win. He would win. He would win for most popular. He would win for best informed. He would win for most humorous and also most courageous. And that's pretty good looking. That's a very good point. And most handsome will have that.
I grew up with her right over there. She was my wife. And she was at my wedding.
Report on this. At any rate, the big thing is that, yes, all of you activists know it's really tough to find people with courage in this diocese, to find people who will stand up, speak up, and support. And that's what Charlie has done. He stood up, he spoke up, and he's been supporting ever since in so many different directions. There just aren't many folks like that. So we have great respect for him, we have great love for him, and yes, we certainly do appreciate him immensely. So, without further ado, we'll let Charlie tell us about his role in this book, Render Unto Rome, where if you have read it, you find that Charlie is mentioned very prominently. And he's going to tell us about that financial scandal, and then move us into the financial scandal that we're living with, which is vibrant churches being sold for profit. So, welcome to Charlie.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Some of you I know very, very well. Some of you I do know, and others it's a pleasure to see you all and perhaps meet afterwards. Nancy is like the women in my life, and Pat knows that to be true. They have to organize me and point me in the right direction. I don't have a problem doing what I'm supposed to do. I have a horrible problem in organizing stuff. So I've always had organized women in my life, starting with my wife and friends I grew up with like Pat, and now I have Nancy to take over in this field. So she gave me a little outline, and so I'm going to follow it because I would be all over the backyard on this thing. And the first thing just to give you some personal background, and then we'll go through that very quickly. I was born in Puerto Rico. I was not born here. I came here when I was a year old. In fact, I came here, landed here on my birthday on November the 24th, 1952. And I grew up across the street from the old St. Patrick's on Bridge Avenue, and that's where we went to grade school and made the sacraments, and in fact my mom and dad celebrate all their anniversaries, and we're buried from there. And my godmother was Irish Catholic, Peggy Gallagher, and she was very, very influential in my life, and she also was baptized, born there, everything, and she just died. So I lost all three of them within 3 years of each other, which has proven to be very upsetting to me, because they were, I think, the two most religious people that I know of were my mom and my godmother, and probably the most influential in my life. My dad, I love my dad because he's the one who really instilled in me that there ain't no difference between them and us. And both my mother and my godmother constantly reinforced that too. So I never came from a home where priests were above the law, could walk on water, that if they were accused of something that the layperson had to be lying. None of those people, who were the three most influential people in my life, believed that. They really did. They were not gossips, but it was, no. It could happen. they're human beings. So I think that when I took the job at the diocese, I went in with that opinion, which, as we go on later on, may have been my demise with them, but I'm proud of the way my parents and my godmother raised me. I went to the old St. Patrick's Day School. I went to the old Cathedral Latin before they moved it out. And then I went to John Carroll University. So as I tell people, I am really neurotic. Kindergarten through university, Catholic schools. And Pat went to Carroll with me as well. And then I went to Cleveland Marshall College of Law. My first job, it says early career, my first job, I thought, well, I was going to become a corporate type lawyer, so I worked for the then Cleveland Trust Company. And I've never hated anything so much in my life. It was just awful. I had to take these old dowagers, and I'm 26 years old because I had skipped a grade earlier on, and so I was young to begin with. I was always the youngest kid in the grade school, in the high school, and always the youngest. And then finished early and that kind of stuff. So here I am, like 25 or 26, looking over at these old dowagers who weren't very nice, and they're dropping this one out of this, and they didn't like this or that. So I did this for about a year, and then realized that I had not made a wise vocational choice. And so, coincidentally, I was on the diocesan pastoral council for the whole diocese, and I had met there, maybe some of you know him or don't know him, is Father Edward Camille, who had been the Secretariat for Health and Human Services, the charities, Catholic charities, whom I love because he was out in left field someplace, not quite sure where, but very devoted to Catholic charities, and very bright man, very, very bright man. And he came to me because I liked him a lot, and we used to sit together, and then when my wife would come, he and my wife would goof around, and the bishop would ask them to leave the meetings, Rosa and Father Camille. And so he found out about what was my displeasure at being at a banking institution, and then he was, I think, an extremely bright man, and he came to me and said, this would have been in 78, and that's when the government began to do third-party contract payments in substantial amounts of money, and they were purchasing services from Catholic institutions as well as other nonprofits, and Ed saw that coming. And he said, well, if that's what's going to happen, then we should become involved in it, so that we're there to get funds to help the people and to provide different kinds of services. And sure enough, he was prophetic. If you look now at the budget of the Catholic charities, the agencies, it's in the tens of millions of dollars. That is not diocesan money. The seed money comes from what is raised in the parishes. And even that, we are the most generous people in fundraising for charities in the United States. Our people are more, not per capita, but dollar for dollar, are more generous in Cleveland than they are in the Archdiocese of Chicago, the Archdiocese of Manhattan, the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. Our people give that much money. So that's used as seed money, which then triggers other monies that are used for different kinds of programs, whether they're social work, nursing homes, elder care, all these things. So anyways, Eddie, Fast Eddie I called him, said, why don't you come on board and be our lawyer, and I think that this would be a good thing. So Cardinal Hickey was the bishop then I met him, and he was kind of cold and offstandish, but I found him to be a very honest man. That was just his style. Do you know what I'm saying? And some people aren't handshake and slapping you in the back and stuff, but that doesn't mean that you aren't a person of integrity. So then I went to work there, and I worked then for Father Camille through the Federation of Catholic Community Services, and then ultimately would report up to the Cardinal, but he wasn't a Cardinal then. He then left to go to Washington, and then Bishop Pilla became the head of the Diocese of Cleveland. I was in my position for about 2 years, because I was there for about 2 or 3 years when Cardinal Hickey was here, and then about 2 years when Pilla was first named bishop. And then it was Sister Mary Ann Andrews, a sister of charity, that came to me and said, there really is, and many things make sense now that didn't at that point. Sister came to me and said, there really isn't a legal office. And I said, well, yes, there is. I says, there's the financial legal office. But she's very quiet, and she said, well, very politely, like, I don't, and again, being thick-headed, I didn't know what all that meant. I do now. And Bishop Quinn was the head of this legal financial office. He then subsequently, and it was he who brought in Joe Smith to do the financial part of this diocese. As I put this together, it makes ultimate sense, because Joe was a mirror image of Quinn and what Quinn wanted. If you read in the book, they quote Joe talking to Jason, and Jason and I spoke any number of times. He flew up here several summers in a row when we would speak. And in the paper, there's a constant reference about how qualified Joe Smith was. That's not true. The diocese sent him to law school, okay, so we all paid for that as well. And he was not very good in the finance department. He truly wasn't, because there was divided into the finance office, into the legal office under Father John Wright. Sister Mary Ann Andrews helped me write and put some things together so that we could put it forward, and then ultimately it was accepted. So the legal part at the very beginning is sliced off, and then I do it. And then he does the financial stuff. I would go to the parishes, he would not. He was above that. And when I would go to the parishes and there would be problems, I would do employment, school law. If they were having problems with their sewers, and we were fighting with City Hall, it didn't really matter. And I had a Franciscan who was an attorney, who is now the head of the legal office of the Diocese of Cleveland, Brother Patrick Shea, who's a very fine gentleman. And so, we did all of that. But one of the constant themes when I went out to the parishes is, they would complain about, we have to do this and that. And I said, well, this is going to cost money, and we would talk about all of that. And then eventually the conversation would come to the finances, and they would be, and again, I do not profess to be a finance person. My background was a lawyer. But they would repeatedly tell me how badly the finances were, that they were set up in a very strange way, and they didn't understand that. Through the years, it became worse, because Joe Smith and Anton Zagaznik created, anybody that knows me, I'm so computer illiterate. I remember one time I was in my office, and when I still worked at the diocese, and my youngest son William was about 9 years old, and I had to get something out of the computer, and then I kept saying, I think the computer's broken, and everything else, and my 9-year-old looks at me and goes, no, it's not. You don't know how to turn it on. And I went, oh. But he was right, I didn't know how to turn it on. So, like I said, I don't know, but I was approached by people from Cleveland Central Catholic, from other parishes, that were complaining about having to first purchase this computer program, then which they said made no sense, and they didn't know how to use it, and they were upset about like the money and the flow of it, and they came to me. Well, like a jackass at that point, I went to John Wright, who would have been here, I would have been here, and Smith would have been there. And at that point, I believed that John was honest. Come to find out that he also participated in looting the diocese. So he said, don't worry about it, I'll take care of it. Don't get involved in this. This is none of your business. I said, well, I think that you ought to send Smith to somebody out there, because these people in these parishes aren't a bit happy in the schools because they say the system really doesn't work. He said, no, that I should not actually get involved in all of that. I went to be the director of the legal office in 1984. In 1985, there was I think it was 1985, maybe 86, 85, I believe. The National Catholic Reporter wrote a series of articles about Father Gauthier. I don't know if you people are familiar with who Father Gauthier is, but that's where this horrible scandal exploded. He was in a rural parish in the Cajun area of Baton Rouge, and he had sexually molested all kinds of kids. And then they came forward. Their attorney was a gentleman by the name of Mouton, and that represented the diocese and then the Archdiocese of New Orleans. They brought in Mouton to try to figure this whole thing out. As this continued to unravel, it became very, very clear to Mouton that the diocese was actively participating in hiding people, lying about what had happened, paying different things. So he then, there's what's called the Mouton-Doyle report, which, some people will admit that exists, others will act like it doesn't. I know that it exists because I have a copy of it. And the Mouton-Doyle report, they did a report to the National Conference of Bishops and gave them, they talked about the problem of pedophile priests. So this would have been the 84, 85, 86. Talked about the problem with pedophile priests, then recommended a methodology of working with them, to get them out of parishes and that sort of thing. The Mouton-Doyle report was then was given out at the National Conference. They ultimately tried to confiscate all of them because they didn't want them out there because the reports clearly indicated the terrible problem that existed. The reports also indicated, because Mouton was a lawyer, that they were handling these situations in an inappropriate legal manner. And then there was this Father Peterson who ran one of the different programs for priests with psychosexual problems. Now, Peterson was an admitted homosexual who died of AIDS, and I have to say, to his credit, the person he died with was Cardinal Hickey. The Cardinal went to hear him, last confession, Like I said, Hickey may have had many, personality kind of quirks and stuff, but he was a decent human being. And I would not necessarily use that in reference to this current bishop or the one before him, who were much more interested in political posturing. So we started to gather the information. By we, I mean Brother Pat and I. And we got the National Catholic Reporter things. We gave them to the Secrets Club or whatever, that the auxiliaries that met, and Joe Smith met, but I wasn't allowed to go there. I guess I was untrustworthy even then, which made no sense. I'm the director of the legal office, but I can't meet at a meeting with him. And so I just, I was there to do a job, so that's what I would do. and trying to explain to them that something needed to be done, that there's a Mutandor report, and there's the National Conference of Bishops, and then there's an attorney's portion of that met every single year. The only one who went was me. John Wright would not go, who's a lawyer. Joe Smith, who was a lawyer, would not go. Anthony Quinn, who was a lawyer, would not go. So they were above the law, and they were, I think, purposefully ignorant. They just didn't want to know. During that time, John Paul II asks Quinn, because he's a lawyer and a bishop, to go down to Baton Rouge and see, take the lay of the land and that sort of thing. And I've only seen it once, to my embarrassment. I was on 60 Minutes with Ed Bradley, and I had heard the letter existed, but I didn't, I hadn't really seen it. Ed Bradley actually had a copy of it, and then he shows it to me right before we were going to go on camera, and I was like, whoa! And in it is a copy of the letter that Quinn sends to the Pope and says that these people are all liars, that this is a great exaggeration, and that this will blow over within a very short period of time. That don't worry about it. And that proved to be poor advice. And then he came back here, and I think he was measuring himself for his ermine jacket or whatever to be a cardinal, which never transpired, and he never became a diocesan priest either. And I think it was that he did, and miscalculating everything in New Orleans. Well, at that point, I had more sway over Sister Christine Vladimiroff, who was a Benedict, I think Christine is still alive, she's in the same order as... she's a
charity, Cincinnati charity now. They joined the Ascension.
No, not Rhodey. This is Christine Vladimiroff. Yeah, she... who is the other sister in her community? Chitterston.
Joan Chitterston.
Yeah, right. Yeah, Joan and she. Right, they're very good friends, because I had met Joan with Christine, at Chris's house, and they'd been to my home for dinner and stuff. So I went to Christine, who was far more enlightened than the rest of those clowns, and I told her what was going on. So then she said to me, I said, we need to structure something about what we do when there's child molestation, who we report it to, how we report it. We need a whole system of doing that. So Christine was very good, and Chris just said, okay. She said, you and Brother Pat set it up, and Susan Jelenik, who was like an administrative assistant to her, who was also a principal, but she was there in that capacity, and several of us all met together, and then we put together a program of giving people information. Pat helped us get, she is Dr. Masterson, I'm sorry, gave us a great deal of information psychologically, and then, we put all of this together, and we showed it to Chris, and Chris said, fine, you can present, the only people that she had any authority over were elementary school and secondary school principals. So they used to have an annual meeting at a different resort, local stuff, like Atwood and Mohican Park and stuff. And so we had the first presentation and a system of reporting abusers, including priests, that she permitted to present. And I'll never forget it, because as we started the presentation, all the lights in the building went out. There was like an electrical storm. and we all kind of thought, well, how appropriate is this? Talking about such a dark subject. So we did all of that, and then we set up a chain of command if it happened in the school, who I was supposed to speak to, which was Susan Jelenik, who would go to Christine. We had talked to people over in Charities, and asked them if they could avail us of some of their social workers when we had to do, and we wanted to do a public meeting afterwards. You participated in some of those, right? Right. Right, and so then we did a substantial amount with the grade schools because Sister Christine was in charge, and and she really kind of did what she wanted, and I know Quinn and those people were kind of PO'd about that, but she kind of just the hell with it, and so she was very conscientious about making sure that the children in the day school programs or PSR, that was her bailiwick, and she was going to be responsible. Then ultimately I did present to Pilla at one point saying, well, our principals are fairly decently workshopped, and we did have, and the protocol that was set up for whether it was interfamilial, out of the family, or priest. And some of the priests got all hot and bothered about that how could we do this, this kind of stuff. And they were upset about that. By that point, there were situations in the diocese that they could not handle. And my brother was a chief police prosecutor at that time, and we knew any number of people. And during that time, any number of priests in this diocese were dying of AIDS. And so I knew that, and became concerned about that. And, Pilla just wanted, that stuff, covered up. And, supposedly people dying of cancer or this or that. No, it wasn't. It was AIDS. And, my concern became, well, these people better keep their hands off anybody, let alone children, and their behavior. I know one of the priests who died of AIDS was shot at the old mall where they're tearing it up now to put the convention center in. And my brother called me. It was a summer night, late evening. I was first married. I only had one child, who is now the parent of two girls. That's how young she was. And I was told by my brother to get downtown now. And so I put on my pants and everything else and ran downtown. And this is the way we did things at that point. And the priest was John Adler, who went to school with my brother at Cathedral Latin. He was a year ahead of me. And he had been shot by a male prostitute who was taking his car. So we shuffled him off to the hospital. We did what we thought was the right thing at that point. And it wasn't a child. It was an adult male prostitute. But the longer I was there, the more I began to see, and everybody casts a shadow, and the foibles. But it didn't seem like anybody learned from their mistakes. What it would do is close ranks in, and then if you said anything, you were gradually pushed out. That I could tell now, years later, that that's what happened with me. Because often as not, I would be the only lay person in a meeting of bishops and consultors and that sort of thing. And they would come up with stuff that I would think, holy mother of God. And Pat knows me. I have a very difficult time keeping my mouth shut. And so I would say, well, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, it isn't like, I felt like getting on the table and yelling and screaming at them, but they can't say that I was irreverent. I did disagree vehemently with them, but it didn't matter. And the other thing that was really offensive was the way they talked about us as lay people. See, I was the only one there, and as I told people, I said the only analogy that I can give would be a black servant in the 1930s serving white people and having those white people at the table talking about, the N-word, and they're lazy and they're this and they're that. And that's what they would say. And so when I tell people all they want is your money, I'm not making this up. I've heard them from Tony Pilla on down. You give the money, and and once it's in the basket, it's ours. They decide where it goes. Very much. And it was very, very offensive. After a number of times of opening my mouth, then I was never invited back, which is fine, because they were going to do whatever they wanted to do, and it was becoming very, very offensive to me. And then he finally agreed to let Quinn goes out to a parish, I think Francis Xavier, and then he leaves embedded Joe Smith, who is really his alter ego at this point. And so he's away from downtown. I talked to Pilla, and I went in with Christine. And we said, because it's getting all out of hand, we have to do something with the priest. Then, I don't know if some of you remember, there was in the late 80s, there was, it involved Joe Romansky, and I think Marty Lewis was in it, and a couple of, Gary Berthiaume. The plain dealer found out, I forget what her name is, and she began, to report on, the beginnings of not that the beginnings of it happening, but like taking the lid off of things. Karen Henderson, and she had met with this, spoken to the one lady, and there was stuff in her story that was just absolutely not right. I had met with the mother, and I said, what does she want? What does she need? Sister Christine met with her because she didn't want to meet with a priest, this lady, and we were trying to work with her, and then her son was had been sexually abused by Joe Romansky, and Father Al Tessick was then the vicar for priest. Now, Father Tessick was a very kind, gentleman priest, and this wound up being, because he was older, this wound up being very difficult for him. However, when I worked with him, and he would tell me, he would say, I don't have a problem you confronting these people. He just could not, and I could understand that. He just, he could not. So, we would go in there and confront people, and Joe was one of them. And one Friday in the summertime, we brought him down, we confronted him. Father Tessick told him to go back to the priest house to get his things, and then to come, I think, to the seminary or something like that. Well, he never showed up. Well, then we found out that he had gone back to the parish and then loaded a station wagon or something and took a whole gang of kids to Cedar Point, including one of the kids that the mother had come to speak to us, and we said, don't do this. So when he came back, Father Tessick removed his faculties, because we were going back and forth on this, and this happened a number of times, about removing faculties from priests and to get them out of parishes. When Father Tessick was there, it was kind of like, you carry the ball, which we did. We would go in together and we would say, and Pilla, for the most part, would begrudgingly will say, okay, because the thing that scared him is when I would say, okay, fine, let's do your pants off. Now that concerned him. It was not the issue of, I'm telling you, it was not the issue, you're going to harm these kids for the rest of your life. No, you're going to lose $50 million. All right, let's remove them. Okay, then Father Tessick left the job. I believe he left the job because he just couldn't take it. It was too much for him. And he was in his 60s, maybe early 70s then. Just a real, very honest, good man. So then he left, and then Father Don Cousins came in. Now, during the time that Tessick was the vicar for priest, I had spoken to Pat, and I said, where is the best place to deal with people with psychosexual disorders? And Pat told me Fred Berlin at Johns Hopkins. So I went and I told Father Tessick. Father Tessick then went to Bishop Pilla. Then they had stuff sent to us, and I think Al may have gone to Johns Hopkins, to see the facility and everything. So he comes back and he says, this makes sense. So the first priests that are identified that we're able to identify are, I would report them to the Department of Human Services of the police, because we got into it. That's a whole other story, Frey, about that. Then, the system was this. What happened in Cleveland is what happened in every other diocese in the United States. There was collusion among everyone. Everyone participated in this, because when Joe was picked up and the mother went after him, and so what did they do? And we presented him with the proof that yes, he did do it, and as a matter of fact, he told us he did it. And I would Mirandize people, say, I don't represent you, and whom I think is a wonderful judge. I really do. Leo Spellici was then the presiding judge of the Common Pleas Court. And what they did is they indicted him with a bill of information, which means they did not do an indictment like they would do for everybody else. It's done very hush-hush. And then it was presented to him, and then within a matter of hours, he pled and he was put on probation. It was like that. Okay? And then he had to supposedly get therapy. So they were sending people to the Paracletes, that's in here too. I'll talk about that in a minute. I kept saying, send him to Johns Hopkins. Send him to Johns Hopkins, because he's got some real serious problems, and they really were. I think besides being psychosexual, I think there was some real problem with African Americans as well, because I think he dehumanized them, and that because he had been brought up in a racially, he acted like he was really friendly with these folks, but what he would say behind their backs and how he treated the children, there was some real bad pathology there. So we were saying, send him to Johns Hopkins, because he's got a lot of problems. So I think they sent him to the Paracletes. Then at one point at the national conference, I was on a number of committees, including one of them about pedophile priests or whatever. So we went out to the Paracletes, where they were sending people, and I think you'll read it in the book. My hair stood on end. It was pedophile heaven. They had like these little cottages for themselves, and they would have some sort of therapy, like laugh therapy. And I mean, I am not kidding you. I said, what in God's name is going on? And then, since it was in the Archdiocese of Santa Fe and they didn't have enough priests, every one of those priests was sent out to a parish on Sunday to say Mass. And many of them were convicted pedophiles that had been, this wasn't they were thinking that, they had been convicted. And then the guy who ran it was Liam Orr, who was a real nutcase. He sat on this committee with me, and so Liam and I had a great many disagreements, and I came back and I told Pilla, you're out of your mind. And these people are there. I mean, this just doesn't make any sense. He had sent in the list of people that have appeared in the paper, one of them was Mullica, a priest named Mullica, and then he was sent to Cherry Hill, and now he's got his own religion and this and that and everything else. And Mullica was one of the ones that he sent out to the Paracletes. I said, it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. And in the Mullica case, this is the case with the boy in Alaska, I should say young man. And then Pilla was videotaped during depositions. Okay. And Baghdad Bob, that's what I call affectionately Bob Tayak, who I don't think can show up in a room fast enough to tell a lie, and ultimately said that he had misguided the family. But what had happened, and I know this to be true, is that Mullica abused his child and sodomized him. The parents then called Pilla up, because he was the vicar out there at that point. Pilla goes to the house. It's Pilla. And he denies all this stuff, Don't put him in a room with me because he knows that I know that's a damn lie. He goes there, sobers him up, and then takes evidence. And what he found was Vaseline stuck under the couch that was used for him to sodomize the child. And when they went to get him, he was, don't know. And he drove him to the airport, where he then went to guest house in Detroit, which is really meant to take care of alcoholic priests. And I don't know, they may do a wonderful job for that, but and all of the priests and most of these people that I have dealt with were pedophiles and alcoholics, and they usually drank, and I learned that from Patsy, to lower their the inhibitions, and then they would act out and stuff like that. But they were not because there are alcoholics, God bless them, but they're not pedophiles. They need someone to deal with their drinking problem, not their acting out, sexually kind of thing. And they were sending them there. Then they also were sending them to St. Luke's Institute, which was a church-run psychotherapy place. And one of the priests that we had sit down there, I had told the who was the rector then or whatever, I said, well, no, he pronounced that he was cured. I said, well, then would you mind putting that in a letter to me? And his response to me was, I treat crazy people, I'm not one of them. So they wouldn't even put it in writing, because they kept moving them into parishes. Of the list that has appeared in the paper, and plus there's more, only defrocked a handful. Others are still very much out there. They are without parishes, but they are out there. One of them, I was at a graduation party, and our dear friends, the Quinlans, we were all together, and they call us Uncle Charlie, Aunt Rosa, and our kids call them Uncle Tom and Auntie Lane. So I would say my niece-in-law came up to me, and she said, "You look like you've seen a ghost." Well, there's a party with about 75 people, many of them kids, and she came up to me and she said, "What's wrong?" And I said, "The guy in the back there at that table is Father so-and-so, and who is a pedophile." She hit the ceiling. And she went in, got my nephew, and said, "We're leaving now." Now, if I hadn't shown up and knew for a fact that he was one, because he told me that he was one, and that I had reported him to the Akron Police Department, I know all of this. What was he doing in a function with that many kids? It was Father Brickman. He ultimately then is brought down to the cathedral so they can keep an eye on him. Yeah, right. So guess what he did when he was at the cathedral? He sexually abused the son of the gardener that would come in to take care of, the outside of the church property. So this misnomer that we were going to take them and, put them here and put them there and that sort of thing, and, they'll be okay. Marty Lewis was a true pedophile, and true pedophile, I mean, these are prepubescent kids. They were 6, 7, 8, 9-year-olds. And so they knew that he was not right and inappropriate. So their decision was that hospital ministry would be a safe place. As far as I know, Marty is still serving time in prison. I reported Marty, and in Lake County, they followed through and they arrested him. And the thing was that he wanted to come up. Back then, it was shock, parole. Now it's judicial release. He wanted to come out in shock, and so they wanted a letter from Pilla, and I told Pilla no. He abused little ones, and whether they're little or adult. But I said, this is outrageous. You can't write a letter. And then he said, oh yeah, sure, Charlie, everything. Well, one fine day, it was in the summertime. There was a crew. I mean, they were from every TV station out of his office, demanding to talk to him, because apparently he did get a letter to give him shock. And what he did is, I talked to me, I told him not to do it. He went to AJ, Alexander James Quinn, and he told him, write it. And I believe, I'm not sure, but I'm pretty sure, I think AJ wrote it, and then Pilla signed it or whatever. Because all of a sudden, rats had left the ship. Nobody would go out to talk to them. Quinn wasn't going to talk to him. He's pretty bold behind doors. He isn't so much when it's face to face. He becomes very Episcopal, very patrician. And he wasn't going to talk to them. The other ones really weren't involved in this. John Wright is a coward. He has no cojones. But he wasn't going to go out there. And then Joe Smith was an idiot. I mean, he couldn't have a conversation legally with somebody or whatever. There was a tunnel that went from the Chancery, from the other building that was the old St. John's, and you could go through it, and then you could wind up in the Chancery office where my offices were. And I come back, and I open the door to my office and walk in, and who's behind the door shaking and crying like a second grader? Anthony Michael Pilla, telling me I should go out and talk to these people because nobody else will do it. Nobody else will do it. So much for gratitude. I said, you're going to have to follow what I tell you. I said, I told you not to do this. You did it. We have to clean it up. I said, I'm going to go out there and tell them that Quinn wrote the letter. I said, we're throwing him under the bus. And I said, and that's it. And I don't want to hear any more about this. So I went out and I threw him under the bus. And, people were like, well, no, he knew that. And AJ didn't like me to begin with. He particularly didn't like me after that. But, it was his responsibility. You have to understand that at that level, no one takes responsibility. I mean, they don't. There's a rationalization for everything. And the other thing is that, which is so typical of a dysfunctional family, we never go out and tell people that daddy beats us, that daddy's a drunk, or that daddy has sex with us. So, what are we taught? Keep silent. And what are the phrases for the church? Cause no scandal to the church. Which means keep your mouth shut. And that is drilled into you and drilled into you. And if you open your mouth, then you have betrayed the family, which is even more important than your blood family, than your wife and your children.